Welcome to Health, Wellbeing and Lifestyle. Today our first guest is Heather Belle Murphy, a health, life and love coach, and our topic is, does love paradise exist? Welcome Heather to the show, and please tell me, does love paradise exist or is it just a fantasy?
I think absolutely love paradise can exist, and I think it depends on, really importantly, of course there's several factors, but really importantly, creating a safe space for love communication, particularly when we come across love bumps. So things like, what I've really found when I've been coaching men, and I've come across this several times working with different male clients of different ages, where we may have all, I think a lot of women, we've had that experience where a man is angry and we can't work out why they're angry, and it's actually because they're experiencing what's really under it is vulnerability, and anger often caps feeling vulnerable for men, particularly in the past, you know, where a man may have been instilled with growing up, be a brave boy, put a brave face on it, stop crying. So what do men do then if they've had that kind of learning and that cap put on their emotional expression? They become angry. So this is a really super skill for women to embody, which is to, when a love bump arises, not take it personally. Listen. We don't have to respond, or we can respond in a, let me think about that, darling. You know, give me some time to think, give me some time to process it. Is this actually pertaining to us or to me? Or is that person just simply feeling vulnerable and being a bit, you know, volatile at that time? So the way you communicate, and I think this comes into my rules of engagement, so that love doesn't become a battleground, you know, where everybody ends up being injured and bloody. So knowing what your rules of engagement are, like even if I bring something to you and it may be a bit bumpy, I'm still going to try and say it gently, you know, and still try and be kind. Now, of course, if somebody has just hit their thumb with a hammer and they're going to explode, well, just let them explode. And of course, people tend to say uncomfortable things when they're in that heightened emotional state, when they're hungry, angry, lonely, tired, HALT, great acronym. So when that happens, you tend to just, you know, if your partner is Vesuvius, just let them blow. Let them blow off steam. In fact, when my partner has classically been a bottler, bless him, so I know that he's feeling particularly safe with me because he comes and he blows his stack to me. Now, I can choose my response because I'm grown up and I'm also responsible, you know, for my response. So if I'm ever a bit offhanded or I raise my voice, even though I feel that I may be right, I apologize because I've spoken out of turn. As we practice, and this is a skill like anything else, as we practice it, we tend to get better at it. And so, again, it's part of that skill set for Love Paradise, a long, sustainable, juicy, intimate love. And I can tell it works because he wants to bring me more and more things.
Could you please elaborate on what a love bump is for our viewers?
There's a big difference between love handles and love bumps. Both are great things, both are great opportunities to grow. Love bumps arise as a natural consequence of, you know, two people coming up close and personal together for a long time. And what you'll actually find, like any challenge, just like the tide going out, it's actually negotiating the love bumps when they arise. Those bumpy times, you know, when we're vulnerable, when we're angry, when we might be going through a time of loss, you know, a time of grieving. And so we may not be showing up with our best selves in relationships. Now hopefully that's the time when one of us is going to step up and be there as the rock of support for the other person. And my partner and I joke about this, where it's like you're on that drive and you can't quite find out where you're going. And he hates that because that's part of his masculine thing, and he's an amazing driver, navigator of Melbourne. And so when we can't find somewhere, he will tend to get a bit tense. And I know that's my time to just zip it. If he wants my help, he'll ask for it. And I just sit back and I just enjoy the ride until he says, "Darling, can you get the Melways out?" Or "Darling, can you Google map this?" Or "I think, can you check that the address that we have is correct?" Now, we're both very clear about our love paradise destination because we both love being in it, and we want to make that as sustainable as possible. So, of course, we follow our rules of engagement, particularly when it comes to love bumps or when one of us is in a bit of a vulnerable situation.
Well, thank you for that. And do you have any tips for our viewers?
Yes. Absolutely. Of course, loving starts with us. If we don't know how to be kind and generous and loving and supporting of ourselves, we're going to find that tricky in relationship. For women, it's necessary that we become the fountain of love and we self-nurture. And that means that in loving ourselves, in honouring ourselves, in respecting ourselves, we're not going to run into that problem of overgiving. And overgiving is a sure way to end up being taken for granted. And also, and this is a real kicker, it tends to kill his inspired masculinity, which is where he wants to keep giving to us, and having us receive those gifts. So that's a really, really big thing. And the other thing is, of course, heal, eat, love, pray to stay balanced in our daily life, every day in every way.
Thank you so much, Heather. If anyone wants more information on Heather Belle Murphy or our topic today, does love paradise exist? You can find her webpage on our website, healthwellbeingandlifestyle.com.au. Now please stay with us and we'll be right back after the break.
Stay tuned. After the break, urban food specialist Marc Noyce is talking about innovative systems that make gardening easier. Welcome back. Our second guest today is urban food specialist Marc Noyce, and the topic we'll be discussing is innovative systems that make gardening easier. Welcome, Marc.
Hi Megan, thank you very much for having me.
Gardening's come a long way. What are some of the latest trends?
Well, let's look at where gardening came from. Where we grew plants in broad acre farming, which we still do. We've been doing that for thousands of years, and it's got us to where we are today, which is fantastic. But most of our population lives in urban cities. We live near the coast, and we congregate in an urban jungle, basically. And we don't have access to those same broad acre farms. We're actually building over our traditional food bowls as fast as humanly possible. So here in Melbourne, for example, our food comes more than 100 kilometres from where we're sitting right now, every day of the week. So we've got to bring in food now from a long distance, and in some cases, some of our food travels thousands of kilometres to get to it. We call that food miles. What we're trying to do is turn food miles into food metres by growing our own food in our backyard or on our balcony. So food has come a long way in terms of how we grow. There are lots of different ways to grow food, and some of the challenges are, how do we do that in an urban environment?
Marc, you've talked about the Wiccan garden beds a little bit. Can you tell us a little bit more about those?
So a Wiccan garden bed is not just like a garden bed in your backyard or a pot, for example. In your backyard, you might have a raised garden bed. It might just be at soil level where you grow some food. You put water on there And quite often that water just goes straight through the garden bed, past the roots, and you're actually watering next door neighbour's trees instead. You put your nutrients on there, you buy some nutrients from the hardware store or the supermarket, and you pour those nutrients on, and they again go straight past your plants, your seedlings, and make your next door neighbour's trees look really fantastic. Gets into the groundwater and it's gone. In a pot, for example, where you pour water on there, it just goes down the sides and you think you've watered your pot, but if you actually break that apart, you'll find that it's really dry. And because when potting mix dries out, it doesn't attract water anymore. So what we want to do is we want to try to hold that water in the pot. So self-watering pots are just a really fantastic way of having a water reservoir in the bottom of the pot and allowing that water to rise up through the potting mix as the plant needs it 24/7. And we call that a wicking garden bed, where if you've ever had a dishcloth in water, you might notice that it rises up out of the water as it travels up the dishcloth. That's called capillary action, it's called wicking, and it's how water can travel up from a water reservoir up through the potting mix and then be available to the plant or the seedlings or whatever you're growing in there whenever that plant needs it. And it just does it naturally. So as it's being drawn up from the bottom through capillary action, a plant reaches down with its roots and sucks it up through suction. So when suction meets wicking, you've got a very happy plant. So a wicking garden bed is a containerised, sealed system that is perched above the water in the soil, so that we're holding that where the plants are for later. Because when it rains, we get a lot of excess rain in our urban environments, and a wicking garden bed captures that in its space for later reuse. So it's very climate adaptive. We can get through a lot of heat waves, and in some cases we can get our plants to survive for weeks at a time in the one containerised system. Let's look at a wicking garden bed. Its elements are: there's a sealed container, there's a water reservoir in the base, which is generally rock, then there's a geotextile layer to separate the rock and the water from the potting mix, then we put our potting mix on top, and then we plant in that, and the water wicks up through capillary action into the potting mix to allow the plants to grow. That's how a wicking garden bed works, or a self-watering pot plant works. There are some advances now where these wicking garden beds have a water reservoir with cones and an air gap between the water and the potting mix, so that we can have free draining and wicking at the same time, and that prevents root rot. You don't want root rot in a container because it goes pretty smelly actually. So by getting a little bit of oxygen, you allow the water to move up through the potting mix, you allow the potting mix to breathe, and I like oxygen and so do plants. So they like to breathe too. Allowing them to breathe gets it much healthier. Allowing the plants to breathe lets them grow more optimally. And so you're going to get the best out of your garden bed if you've got a wicking garden bed that can breathe.
That's fantastic information, Marc. So Marc, what's some advice for our audience in creating their own urban garden bed?
Megan, setting up your own urban garden is actually quite easy. With a wicking garden bed, for example, you can avoid losing all your water, you can avoid having roots come into it from your next door neighbour's trees. You can actually make it very ergonomic by getting it up off the ground and having that raised garden bed so that you're not bending and hurting your back when you're watering or tending to your garden. You can set up an urban farm really quickly these days by having a connectable modular garden bed system that takes the hard work out of gardening. Imagine coming home on a hot day and then you see your garden bed just wilting and dying because you haven't been there to water it. Well, a wicking garden bed solves that. A wicking garden bed gives the plants exactly what it needs 24/7. So certain types of plants can access water all the time versus others that don't like a lot of water can just take what they need, and just more comes up naturally through a wicking garden bed.
Wow, that's fantastic information there, Marc. Thank you. If you'd like to know more about Marc and the innovative systems that make gardening easier, go to his webpage on our website, healthwellbeingandlifestyle.com.au. And after the break, we'll have another interesting guest and another interesting topic. Stay tuned, and after the break we have international meditation teacher and coach Daniella D'Amore talking about a balanced life through spiritual growth. Welcome back. We have international meditation teacher and coach Daniella D'Amore, and the topic we'll be discussing is the importance of a balanced lifestyle through spiritual growth. Welcome, Daniella.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
Why is spirituality important for a balanced life?
Spirituality is just as vital in our life as it is to understand our physical body. Right? So if we focus on our physical body and don't focus on our spiritual life, then we don't have a greater sense of purpose in our life. Right? I feel that it's important to balance the physical, the emotional, mental, and spiritual bodies in order to align ourselves to perfect health and well-being, and therefore create a much more healthier and happier lifestyle. It's important to balance all four bodies, and yet most people will focus on the physical body or focus on the emotional body and even the mental body, and the spiritual body tends to sort of be left behind. And then, so they may get to a place of healing, but there's still something lacking. Or they may achieve a lot in their life, but they still feel a sense of emptiness. Or they may have the most amazing relationships in their life, but there's something meaningful still missing. Like there's a sense of, okay, what's missing? And to me, what's missing is the spirituality.
Daniella, what's your personal journey in discovering spirituality for a balanced life?
Well, can I say I've had many journeys that really emphasize the importance of spirituality. But as a young girl, starting out in life, and when I became a woman, I had a lot of issues, health issues with my monthly cycle. And we know today it's called endometriosis, but back then it wasn't diagnosed like that. And it was, very uncomfortable, and I was just given medicine to take. Well, in my feeling, my sense was, no, this is not right. This is supposed to be natural. So why am I taking medicine? No. So I seeked out alternative ways to heal myself through this. And so I did go to a naturopath, I went to acupuncturist, and I started meditation. And over the next few years, I just found that it's, I had good months and I had bad months, but there wasn't that consistency anymore of the uncomfortable feeling. And about 7 years later, I was able to have cycles with no pain because I chose a more spiritual way of dealing with it. But at the same time, I was healing my physical body, sure, but there was a lot of emotional stuff connected to that as well. So in the process of getting that healing through various channels, my emotional body and mental body also started to change. And I became a big advocate for meditation. Meditation became part of my everyday life, and just healthier choices, health and various things that accompany that. And I found that, as I said, about 7 years later, I started to have cycles that were not so painful. And that just improved as I got older and older. And then ultimately, the good thing about that is when I went through menopause as well, it just happened. Like there was no side effects or anything. And I know that that was based on the fact that I took care of myself on a physical, emotional, mental, and spiritual level, right? I started to embrace my whole self as a woman, having this human experience. And of course, I saw the results of that, in due course. And to make that story come full circle, I lived in the United States for a number of years, and during that time I was very honoured to be able to spend time with Native people there in mostly Arizona, New Mexico and South Dakota. And having spent time with the Native women there, I realised that a lot of them did not have the same issues around cycles, monthly cycles, as Western women do. So I explored that a little bit and asked them, various questions. And what I realized was it's something that's actually celebrated. When a young girl becomes a woman, there's a whole ceremony and it's celebrated, and the whole tribe celebrates. Everybody comes out and celebrates it. So it's something that's really embraced, because now she can create life, right? So these native women already start their cycle in a celebratory type way. It's not a stressful thing. And then they maintain spirituality throughout their whole life. They do women's circles and various things, women's gathering, but spirituality is very much a part of their culture, all of the tribes. So it's something that is part of their upbringing. What I found was that they just didn't stress about things the way we did, and there was no expectation, if you will, for them to be anything other than the beautiful women that they are. Whereas I feel in our society, women feel they have to step into a different role, to compete with men sometimes, so we neglect our femininity. Whereas they embrace their femininity and their feminine power. And it's a beautiful thing. And they all supported each other through that. So what that helped me realize was that what I was feeling as a young girl really had some substance. Why was I thinking that? I don't know where that came from. I just knew that it was natural for women to be like this and to find the supportive system. So that was really confirming and very affirming as well, because it affirmed how powerful it is for us to embrace who we are. We as women in the Western world, our own power, our own femininity. And of course for men to embrace their own masculinity, who they are. And we play specific roles in that power. So when we can embrace that, we're much more powerful. And our bodies will reflect that, right? But in order to embrace that, there has to be that spiritual side, that meaningful, purposeful, that part of ourselves that we feel is missing. No, it's right here. We've just got to embrace it.
Daniella, that was a great story.
Yeah, it's great. Thank you.
Do you have any advice for our viewers to have a balanced life spiritually?
Well, my advice would be to just listen to their inner self, because that's where our spiritual body resides, somewhere inside of us. Most people will say it's in your heart, but it can be anywhere. It can be in your toe. I don't know where you feel, whatever you feel. But think about how you feel when you see a sunrise or a sunset. There's something magical about that, and we can feel that magic within us. It makes us stop and look at it and go, wow. Or when a rainbow appears, and we all want the rainbow to be magic, magical, and we have a sense of that. Well, that's our spiritual body responding to that. So it's already happening. It's just a matter of making yourself more conscious of how you feel in that moment, and knowing that you have those feelings throughout the day, and they're important. They're an important element to who you are. And then to seek it out more. So how can you get that feeling more and more? Through what? Through whatever makes you happy, really. Whatever you do that makes you happy, whatever hobby, or maybe there's people, maybe there's places, things that you like to do that makes you feel happy inside, do more of that. That's all. Because that's called loving yourself. And the more and more you love yourself, the more and more spirituality you're living in your life.
Thank you, Daniella. That was such valuable information. If you'd like to know more about Daniella and how to have a more balanced lifestyle through spiritual growth, please go to her webpage on our website, healthwellbeingandlifestyle.com.au. And we're going to say bye-bye for now, and we'll see you next week. Stay tuned.
If you'd like to know more about our show, please like our Facebook page and also subscribe to our YouTube channel.